And then just globally, do you have a sense of, like, sorry, I'm not trying to give you an ego here, but like if you look at the numbers on YouTube for like the pre-tournament press conferences, how much people watch them?
Heartbreak in Strasbourg
Globally,
and a
do you have
Legends
sense of, like,
revival.
sorry,
The
I'm not trying
drama
to give you an ego here, but,
unfolding
like, if
on
you look at the
Europe's
numbers
clay courts.
on YouTube.
In the tournament 2014, it's 2026, and you're still winning here in Melbourne. How do you do it?
Hold on to your rackets, tennis fans, because this week on the European clay swing has delivered everything we could possibly ask for. Heartbreak, comeback stories, warrior spirit, and a reminder that this sport never, ever runs out of ways to make our jaws drop. We are talking about two stories that could not be more different in their texture, yet somehow feel like they were written by the same dramatic hand. One involves a young Filipino superstar who poured everything she had into a 3-hour war in Strasbourg, France, and came out on the other side empty-handed. The other features a Swiss veteran who absolutely refuses to let Father Time win, grinding out a come-from-behind thriller in Geneva to remind the entire tennis world exactly who Stan Wawrinka is and what he is still capable of. If you thought the clay court season was winding down before Roland Garros, think again, because what is happening across France and Switzerland right now is must-watch television, and we are breaking it all down for you right here on Champions Tennisitics. Let us start in Strasbourg, France, where the 2026 Strasbourg Open has been serving up some incredibly compelling first-round action. The city of Strasbourg, nestled on the border of France and Germany, is the kind of place where you almost expect drama. It has a rich, layered history, a stunning Gothic cathedral, and now it has etched itself into the early chapter of Alex Ila's 2026 clay season in a way that is going to sting for a while. Because what happened on those clay courts in Strasbourg on Tuesday was not just a tennis match. It was a battle, a war, a nearly 3-hour emotional roller coaster that had everyone watching completely glued and ultimately left the Filipino star heartbroken in the most gut-wrenching of fashions. Alex Ila walked onto that court with something to prove. The young Filipina, who has been steadily making a name for herself on the WTA circuit and carrying the dreams of an entire nation on her shoulders every single time she steps between those lines, came out swinging against Ukraine's Alexandra Oleinikova. And for a while, it looked like this was going to be Ila's day. The first set was commanding, assertive, and full of the kind of aggressive baseline tennis that has made Ila such an exciting player to watch. She took that opening set 6-3, looking confident, looking sharp, looking like a player who had come to Strasbourg with a clear game plan and the tools to execute it. Now here is where the story gets complicated, because Oleinikova is no pushover. This is a Ukrainian warrior who has been through things on and off the tennis court that most of us can barely imagine, and she was not about to roll over for anyone. In the second set, she dug deep, found another level, and began to match Ila shot for shot in those long, grinding clay court rallies that are the hallmark of tennis on the terra battue. The second set turned into an absolute thriller, with both players refusing to give an inch, pushing each other to the absolute limit. Oleinikova forced the set to a tense conclusion and eventually clawed it back 5-7, leveling the match and turning what might have been a comfortable Ila victory into something far more nerve-wracking. At 1 set apiece, with legs tired and lungs burning from nearly 2 hours of ferocious competition, both players walked into that deciding third set knowing everything was on the line. And this is where it gets heartbreaking, because Ila gave everything she had. She showed the grit and composure that her supporters have come to expect from her. She engaged in those marathon baseline exchanges that define clay court tennis, fought for every point, and refused to go quietly. But Oleinikova, feeding off the momentum she had built in that second set comeback, found something extra in the third. She pulled away late in the deciding set, ultimately closing out the match 6-3 in the third, for a final scoreline of 3-5-7, 6-3 in favor of the Ukrainian. 3 sets, nearly 3 hours. And at the end of it all, Alex Ila was eliminated in the opening round of the Strasbourg Open. The numbers alone do not tell you the full story of what happened on that court. The rallies were long, the points were intense, and the level of tennis from both players was genuinely impressive for a first-round clay court encounter. Ila's ability to compete for that length of time against a seasoned opponent and still make it competitive right to the end says something real about her development as a player. But that will be cold comfort right now, Because when you come out and take the first set with such authority, the expectation shifts. You start to think this could be the day. And when it slips away after 3 hours of effort, the pain is proportionally enormous. What makes this loss particularly interesting to analyze is the broader context of where Ila is in her career right now. She is a player who burst onto the scene with enormous hype, and rightly so. Her game has all the ingredients of a future top 10 player. Powerful ground strokes, excellent movement for her size, a competitive fire that burns intensely, and the kind of mental composure that usually takes years to develop. She has shown flashes of brilliance throughout her career, and at just 20 years old, she is still very much in the early stages of her professional journey. But tennis is a sport that demands consistency, and the clay season can be particularly unforgiving. It rewards patience and construction, the ability to build points methodically and wear your opponent down over the course of long, physically demanding matches. And while Ila has shown she can compete at that level, Oleinikova demonstrated on Tuesday that she is further along in mastering those clay court nuances. There is also the matter of the mental game in deciding sets. When you have a one-set lead and the match slips to a third, there is an inevitable psychological recalibration that has to happen. You were in control, and suddenly you are not. Maintaining composure through that shift is one of the hardest things in professional tennis. Ila has done it before, and she will do it again, but on this particular afternoon in Strasbourg, it was Oleinikova who handled the pressure of that third set with more authority. For Oleinikova, this is a significant victory. She advances from a 3-set grind against a genuinely dangerous. What happens next for Ila is the question everyone is already asking. Roland Garros, the most prestigious clay court tournament in the world, looms large on the horizon. The French Open is the kind of stage where careers are made and legends are cemented, and it is the tournament that every player on the WTA Tour is building toward at this time of year. Whether Ila has a wild card, earned her way into the main draw, or is competing in qualifying rounds, the focus will shift almost immediately to Paris. And Paris, with its historic red clay, its passionate crowds, and its unmatched atmosphere, has a way of putting everything else in perspective. But let us not rush past Strasbourg too quickly, because what Ila showed in that 3-hour battle deserves to be acknowledged. You do not stay on court for nearly 3 hours against a professional tennis player on clay and come away without having demonstrated real quality. The first set performance was excellent. The rally quality throughout the match was high. The composure Ila showed in difficult moments was noteworthy. She walked off that court with her head held high, and that matters. It matters for her confidence, it matters for her development, and it matters for the fans who have invested emotionally in her journey. Now let us get on the train from Strasbourg and travel a few hours east into Switzerland, because the city of Geneva is hosting its own clay court drama this week. And the story coming out of the Geneva Open is one that warms the heart and reminds you why tennis fans never truly stop loving the players who have given them so much over the years. Because, ladies and gentlemen, vintage Stan is absolutely, undeniably, gloriously still alive. Stan Wawrinka. Just say that name and see what happens to a tennis fan who has been watching this sport for any length of time. 3-time Grand Slam champion. Olympic gold medalist. One of the most ferociously talented players of his generation. The man responsible for some of the most breathtaking shot-making the sport has ever seen. A one-handed backhand that belongs in a museum of pure sporting art, and a competitive record that includes defeating Novak Djokovic, Rafael Nadal, and Roger Federer on the grandest stages the sport has to offer. If you have ever watched Stan Wawrinka play tennis at his best, you know that you have witnessed something that goes beyond sport and becomes something closer to performance. Something spectacular. But the last several years have been hard for Stan. Injuries, surgeries, long absences from the tour, the kind of comeback struggles that would have finished lesser competitors. There were moments when even the most devoted Wawrinka fan had to wonder whether vintage Stan was simply a beautiful memory. Whether the body that had carried him to 3 major titles had finally said enough. Whether the one-handed backhand would only be seen in highlight reels from now on. And then he walks onto the clay courts of Geneva, his home country, and he does something that has the tennis world buzzing all over again. He beats Reinier Brancaccio in a 3-set match that tells you everything you need to know about why Wawrinka has always been different. The final score was 6-2, 4-6, 7-6, And if you think those numbers suggest a comfortable afternoon for the Swiss veteran, think again. This was a fight. A real, extended, sweaty, tension-filled Geneva clay court fight, and Wawrinka came out on the right side of it. The first set was vintage Stan at his most dominant. 6-2, efficient, powerful, and full of the kind of confident shot selection that the Swiss plays with when everything is clicking. His serve, always a weapon, was finding its spots. His backhand, that glorious, legendary single-handed weapon, was working beautifully. You could almost feel the electricity from the Geneva crowd, Swiss tennis fans who have always adored Wawrinka and who desperately wanted to see him thrive on home soil once again. And for that first set, he gave them exactly what they were hoping for. Then Brancaccio, to his enormous credit, fought back. The young Italian is a clay court specialist, comfortable and confident on the red dirt, and he refused to accept the match on Wawrinka's terms in the second set. He began to find his game, extending rallies, making Wawrinka work for every point, and ultimately taking the second set 4-6 to level the match. Suddenly, the atmosphere in Geneva had changed. The crowd was nervous. Was this going to be another painful near miss? Was Stan going to run out of gas in that decisive third set? The answer, thank goodness for all of us who love this sport and love this player, was a resounding no. The third set went all the way, with both players locked in a tense, absorbing battle that required every bit of Wawrinka's considerable experience and fighting spirit to navigate. When it finally came down to a tiebreak, you could almost hear the collective held breath of everyone watching. And Stan, in the most Stan Wawrinka way possible, found a way to win it. 7-6 in the third. Match to Wawrinka. Geneva goes absolutely wild. What makes this win so meaningful goes beyond the result itself. It is about what Wawrinka represents and what he has had to overcome to still be competing at this level. His body has been through the wars. Multiple surgeries, extended periods away from the tour, the grinding, painful process of rebuilding not just physical fitness, but competitive sharpness and mental confidence. Many players in his situation would have quietly retired, taken their 3 Grand Slam trophies off the shelf, and accepted a legacy that any professional tennis player would be proud of. Stan Wawrinka is not that player. He has always had a ferocity to him, a refusal to accept defeat that has defined his greatest moments. For most of Wawrinka's career, he existed in the shadow of his compatriot, a situation that would have crushed lesser personalities, but which Wawrinka navigated with grace, humor, and a self-awareness that made him enormously likable. He always knew his own worth, even when the spotlight was directed elsewhere, and his Grand Slam victories were a testament to that self-belief. Now Federer is retired, and the Swiss tennis story has shifted. Wawrinka is the elder statesman, the living connection to that golden era of Swiss tennis, and when he wins on Swiss soil, it carries extra emotional weight. The Geneva crowd loves him unconditionally, and watching him grind out that 3-set victory against Brancaccio felt like a genuine celebration of everything he has given to the sport and to his country. The Geneva Open itself has been building momentum as one of the more compelling clay court tune-ups in the weeks before Roland Garros. Situated in beautiful Switzerland with the Alps as a backdrop and a partisan crowd that genuinely appreciates the craft of clay court tennis, it is the kind of tournament that attracts players who need match time on red dirt before the French Open, as well as veterans like Wawrinka, who know the European swing represents one of the best opportunities to build momentum heading into the year's most grueling major. The matchup between Wawrinka's progress in Geneva and Ila's early exit in Strasbourg creates one of those fascinating contrasting narratives that make following tennis simultaneously wonderful and emotionally exhausting. Both players compete at a professional level that requires immense dedication, sacrifice, and talent. Both walked on a clay courts this week with something to prove and gave everything they had in matches that went to 3 sets. One emerged victorious, one did not. That is the brutal, beautiful simplicity of professional tennis. Looking ahead, Wawrinka's draw in Geneva will be scrutinized closely. Each round represents a new challenge, and at his age, managing the physical demands of multiple 3-set matches becomes increasingly important. But he has shown this week that the quality is still there when his body cooperates, and that is genuinely exciting. A deep run in Geneva would send an extraordinary message to the rest of the clay court field heading into Roland Garros. For Ila, the focus turns immediately to what comes next. The WTA calendar is relentless, and there are opportunities to bounce back quickly. More importantly, the French Open represents the ultimate clay court stage, and if Ila is in the Paris draw, she will have the chance to show the world that one difficult afternoon in Strasbourg does not define what she is capable of. She has the game to compete at Roland Garros, and the
I think everyone is entitled to their own opinion, definitely. And being a public figure, my results are out there, my games are out there. It's inevitable that people will have...
The European clay season has a way of revealing character. It rewards the patient, the resilient, and the brave. It punishes those who panic, who abandon their game plans under pressure, or who let one bad moment in a match spiral into something unmanageable. What we saw from both Ila and Wawrinka this week, despite their contrasting results, was genuine character. Ila's composure in a 3-hour battle against an experienced opponent shows a young player maturing before our eyes. Wawrinka's refusal to surrender in a third-set tiebreak shows a veteran champion who simply cannot stop competing, even when everything in him must be screaming to let go. Tennis has a unique relationship with time. The sport demands so much physically that careers are finite, and yet it also rewards experience in ways that allow players who have taken care of their bodies and their minds to compete well into their 30s. Wawrinka, at 40 years old, is perhaps the most extreme example of that principle in action right now on the ATP Tour. The fact that he is still competing, still winning matches on clay in Switzerland, still giving the Geneva crowd those moments of pure joy, is something to be treasured rather than taken for granted. One day, Stan Wawrinka will play his last professional tennis match. That day is not today, and tennis fans everywhere should be grateful for it. Meanwhile, Alex Ila's story is only just beginning. Every painful early exit, every 3-set loss in a tournament's opening round, every moment when the match slips away despite a 1-set lead, is adding material to the foundation of a player who is going to have a significant career on the WTA Tour. The Filipino superstar has everything she needs to compete at the highest level. What she is gaining right now, week by week, match by match, tournament by tournament, is the experience that will eventually allow her to convert these close calls into victories in the moments that matter most. Strasbourg stings. Geneva celebrates. And the clay court season rolls on toward Paris, where the most dramatic chapter of the tennis year is about to begin. Roland Garros, with its brutal red clay, its massive crowds, its history and its tradition, and its absolutely unmatched capacity for sporting drama, is waiting. And when the gates open and the players walk out onto Philippe Chatrier under those famous Parisian skies, everything that happened this week in Strasbourg and Geneva will feel like the perfect setup for whatever extraordinary story is about to unfold. This is tennis in May. This is the clay season. This is why we are all here, watching, suffering, celebrating, and loving every single second of it. If this breakdown gave you the kind of deep dive analysis and storytelling you come to Champions Tennisitics for, then you know exactly what to do right now. Smash that like button because it genuinely helps this channel reach more tennis fans who deserve to hear these stories told the right way. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are you still an Ila believer heading into Roland Garros? Do you think vintage Stan has enough left in the tank to make a serious run in Geneva? We want to hear every take, every opinion, and every prediction you have got. And if you are not already subscribed to Champions Tennisitics, this is your moment. Hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you never miss a story, a breakdown, or a moment from the clay courts of Europe or anywhere else in the tennis world. The season is heating up, Paris is calling, and Champions Tennisitics is going to be right here for every single second of it.